broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody, for tonight's Chiron and Aries Around the Houses live webinar with Kim Marie and Leroy. This is the final in a six-part series around the houses, and tonight we're going to explore the 11th house and the 12th house transits with Chiron. So thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Kim Marie.
All right, thank you, Leroy. Thank you for introducing the title. As you can see on your screen, we're going to quickly go through the slides that we do every class with this part of our series, just giving us some basics. First of all, our housekeeping slide of the 3 different ways you can study with us here at EAN. We have a free weekly audio podcast, Astro Library you can subscribe to, and of course our Evolutionary Astrology course. You can contact us as you see in the bottom of your screen if you would like some more information in regards to anything we offer at EAN. Here are the dates that Chiron is in Aries. As you can see, it's going to be coming up in about a month that it moves into Aries. It'll dip back in Pisces. So 2018 is it's that Pisces Aries. We still got all the Piscean things to finish up, as well as the Aryan initiations. It's 1 foot in the past, 1 foot into the future with healing. And as you can see, this is going to be about an 8-year transit for Chiron in Aries. Here's its orbit. I've been showing this visually. Yellow line is Saturn, and the white line is Chiron, and here's the sun in the middle. So you can see Chiron actually dips inside of Saturn's orbit for part of its circle around the zodiac. It actually goes outside of Uranus orbit as well. So as you can see, it really varies widely on how far away or how close it is to the sun. And that creates an orbit around the zodiac that looks like this. Chiron spends 3/5 of its cycle in just 4 signs: Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. And if you would look at this visually, if we've got 8 years in Aries, I'm going to say we got about 8 years in Pisces and Taurus, maybe a little less in Aquarius, but still some pretty long transits compared to these relationship signs over here on the other side of the zodiac. Barbara Hand Clow called Chiron the Rainbow Bridge because its orbit is in between Saturn and Uranus. And in EA, Saturn is the individuated consciousness, Uranus is the individuated unconsciousness. And so Chiron bridges the conscious and unconscious bodies that we have within ourselves. In other words, Chiron can be conscious and Chiron can be unconscious. It exists on both sides as well. And of course, Barbara Hand Clow thought that the consciousness part was the struggle to get in the body, stay in the body, expand or raise consciousness. This is the Virgo side. She gives Chiron rulership of Virgo as well. EA doesn't have necessarily a position on that. The unconscious part of Chiron is the Pisces side. And of course, this will bring in the shamanism and the ancient wisdoms that'll many times get caught up in the healing arts as well. Chiron is most well known as the wounded healer, where we have to let go of something in order to heal. For many of us, it's letting go of the wounded story. You know, the ex who left us, the car accident that we barely survived, whatever our wounded story is, this life, past lives, it's about letting it go. Now, this ultimately include death. In mythology, Chiron was the centaur that was wounded in battle. He couldn't heal his wounds, and so he exchanged his immortality for death in order to be freed from his wounds. Chiron is about illuminating those wounds. This is the part that makes it conscious, brings them into the light, makes them known so that we recognize exactly what it is that we need to heal. And as we do that, we turn whatever is the wound in our world into some of our talents and gifts that we can share as a healer. So Chiron can be the healed healer as well. Chiron was discovered in the late 70s. It rules all the healing arts, and that was when we saw a lot of your alternative healing become more and more conscious in the mainstream. Kairos is Greek for hand. So of course, Chiron rules any of the healing arts that involve the hands, as you see on your screen. This is something that I conceived and I've just known forever. I just call it SMEP, which stands for spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. But basically, every manifestation of some physical imbalance or dis-ease has crystallized emotions behind it. And behind every emotional imbalance is a mental imbalance, or distorted or wounded thoughts and mental patterns. Behind every mental imbalance is a spiritual imbalance or some type of disconnect with universal source. So every illness starts with a spiritual disconnect, which then leads to a mental distortion, which then leads to crystallized emotions, which then condense into a physical manifestation that we will call a dis-ease. Healing works the same way. Those of you who have known people who have had spontaneous or miraculous healings, or if it's happened with yourself, there has always been some type of spiritual reconnection with source, some spiritual aha that becomes conscious within you. And it's an acceptance then of our co-creation process with universal source. And when we have that spiritual aha or awareness, it will then lead to some type of healing on the mental plane, typically of a positive nature, that then leads to some type of an emotional healing, self-acceptance, self-love, which then condenses into a physical release of whatever the dis-ease is as the body reestablishes health within itself. So if you want to go with Chiron having rulership of Virgo or the 6th house, you know, in traditional astrology, that's always where we have the manifestation of diseases. Now we know it's broader than that. All 12 archetypes have rulership in health and wellness. However, you can see from the perspective of Chiron in healing, when you can apply this process, how do I heal spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, on every level, no matter what level it's manifested on, it helps you to really accelerate that healing process. So for me, this is part of Chiron's work, is to address it on all 4 levels. Now, when Chiron's retrograde in Aries, it's going to point to Libra, and it's going to bring up that healing art of being able to listen and observe someone else from their perspective. This, of course, allows us to give to another as they wish to receive. The opposite of that, Aries, is always giving what we want to give someone. Chiron retrograde will emphasize the healing gift of honest communicating, being real, being truthful with someone else, but it also requires us to be open to taking in the feedback from others. Because Chiron retrograde in Aries pointing to Libra, everybody else is going to want to be able to tell us what they think and what they want to say as well. So how well can you take it in? How well can you listen as well as speak? Chiron retrograde here is also going to be searching for fairness, balance, equality in any way. Of course, it's where to review action, Aries, and it's reviewing the issue in Libra of domination and being dominated, and being able to release either extreme and actually have an equal giving and receiving take place while Chiron moves through Aries. And we're going to get at least, I think it's 9 retrograde cycles with that Chiron is going to be in Aries, pointing towards Libra. You're going to get more than one chance over the next 10 years. Chiron retrograde in Aries also means a willingness to ask others for help when we need it in healing any of our wounds that come into consciousness. Aries, me, myself, and I could do it. Libra, how can we ask for the help? How can we receive the help? How can we help others who are asking us? And together make a better effort with facilitating the process of healing in whatever way is necessary. It is time to reconsider the initiations to take in our life in general, because as we reviewed Chiron in Aries in the first part of our series, Chiron was in Aries in 1968 through 1977. If you just look back on the list from that first part and all of the social justice activities that went on with Chiron in Aries, you know, we had the young protesting the war. We had them protesting the civil rights movement and really asking for some of those gender equalities as well. Isn't it interesting? As we are one Chiron cycle later, here are the young ones, Aries, protesting again with whatever they consider to be unfair and hurtful in our world again. So Chiron retrograde in Aries, how do you want to take initiations as your spiritual warrior? Of course, I think that this is going to initiate a brand new cycle of really looking at healthcare, no matter what country we're residing in, because this new Chironic cycle is going to revolve around initiating healing in general. And of course, when Chiron is retrograde in Aries, it can be quite frustrating. Aries doesn't like anything holding it back from its perception of freedom. So all the anger and the rage and the frustrations can come running out of us. And of course, you know, Aries is the lone terrorist. And if we have wounded souls who have no idea how to address their wounding, who don't know how to ask for help, if a society doesn't have the resources available to reach out and help someone, then we can see an increase of all of these wounded warriors, lone terrorists coming out, and even intensified when Chiron is retrograde in Aries anytime. I don't think we've seen our last mass shooting yet in the United States. Let's hope these kids in this Chironic cycle can bring it about for us. Barbara Hand Clow felt that forecasting Chiron would always bring an alchemizing process to whatever the evolutionary journey is of any planet and its archetype and any planetary aspect. So forecasting Chiron by transit, progression, and solar arc, again, will bring an alchemizing energy to heal whatever natal planet it aspects. And in that same regard, the reciprocal can happen. Any forecasting planet by transit, progression, and solar arc can bring about energy to help natal Chiron heal as well. And then while we have worked our way around the 12 houses of the circle, wherever your Chiron in Aries transit house is, it must always be related back to the natal Chiron signature, because forecasting Chiron is always going to be helping heal natal Chiron as well. And as you've seen before, and you will see tonight with our last two chart examples, we also look at natal, excuse my burps. We look at natal Chiron by its own sign and house, the rulers of that sign and house, and the aspects that natal Chiron makes as well. However, as I said before, throughout 2018, and I think even into early 2019, Chiron doesn't go into Aries the second time till February 18th, 2019. So throughout 2018, we're going to dip back into Pisces. So we all got one more chance to really heal any of the wounding from Chiron in Pisces. And basically, if we're not healing, we are going to recycle or carry forward those Piscean issues into Aries. And while there's a variety of Piscean issues, and we'll look at them with this 12th house transit tonight, you can boil a lot of it down to either victim or victor consciousness, the sadomasochism. The victim consciousness is guilt at our human imperfections linked to atonement. That is the masochist or victim. We will carry forward then that sense of unworthiness and collapsing in upon ourselves. We're going to lack the initiative then as Chiron goes into Aries. If it's the victor consciousness, which is guilt linked to anger, this is the sadist, we will go into Aries with a lot of anger and revenge and just lashing out and get them before they get me. So it will behoove all of us as we finish up Chiron's transit in Pisces. What is it I need to be conscious of within myself to heal? Where do I feel the victim? Where am I angry? How do I find that ultimate unconditional love with universal source? I have said for a long time, the relationship we have with ourselves is identical to the relationship we have with universal source. And the relationship we have with universal source is identical to the relationship we have with ourself. So how do we learn that unconditional love for ourself, warts, farts, and all? Another one of my Piscean sayings is ultimate responsibility brings ultimate freedom. You may have heard in the world of EA that ultimately there is no victimization. Things just don't randomly happen. There is meaning and logic to the universe on a philosophical level. And by the time we get to the last of the 12 archetypes, it's learning how to not only have that relationship with Source, but to have complete and utter responsibility for ourselves. And the gift that comes from that is absolute freedom. So there's that shift from Pisces to Aries that all of us are in process of making to some degree this year. Now, as Chiron moves into Aries, some of the things that we can look at or ask, what is wounded within me that needs to be made conscious? A brand new cycle, another layer coming up to the surface to be understood, to be healed, to be released. And releasing it is giving it back to Source. This is Aries coming from Pisces. Source is the one that can heal it better than any of us can imagine. So how do we take what is wounded and say, help me, Source? How would you have me heal this? How do we listen for feedback from the universe in regards to our wounds and traumas, especially when Chiron is retrograde pointing towards Libra? We will listen for inner feedback, the inner messages that come. We'll listen for outer feedback from people and the universe. How do we ask for help, especially when Chiron's retrograde pointing towards Libra? As I showed you from the slides before, how do I apply that self-healing process as SMEP? Regardless of whether it's an emotional wound, an actual physical wounding, whatever level exists on, we want to ask, how do I heal it on all 4 of these levels? That's how you will really bring about a completeness as much as possible in any given lifetime to whatever it is you are trying to heal within yourself. And then, of course, Chiron and Aries, how do I initiate a new process going forward with my life? How do we turn whatever was wounded into the talents and gifts that we'll share? How do we become the healer? Whether it's actually something that we do for an occupation, or whether it's something in which we are just trying to hold the consciousness of healing on planet Earth in general for all souls, all species, for planet Earth itself in regards to climate change. All right, that's just a little recap, trying to hit some bullet points there. Let's look at Chiron in Aries transiting through the 11th house, and what are some of the issues of woundedness and the healing that we can do there. First of all, the 11th house is active fixed air. Active polarity, fixed modality, and the element of air. And of course, if you've done any studying with evolutionary astrology, what do you learn? Uranus ruling Aquarius and the 11th house rules traumas. Traumas that each of us have on an individual unconscious level. And this will include traumas from past lives. So we're going to have a double whammy with this house transit. And now we won't even only have, and this is true of all 12 houses, but it's emphasized here with the 11th. It's not only what's wounded us in this life, the lover left us or whatever, it's past life wounds. And remember, Chiron can go both conscious, unconscious. Chiron can dip into that unconsciousness and bring it to the surface. So all those past life wounds and traumas, Chiron is going to be working to make them conscious. How do you heal it if you're not even aware of it? How do you heal it if you don't understand the process or depth of the whole pattern? Now, the end of the slides, I will give you Jeffrey Green's reprogramming your unconsciousness exercise, which I think is very valid for chironic work in being able to heal things under the surface that we don't always recognize. Of course, as we look at all this wounding, as we heal it, one of the biggest things we can do with the 11th house is turn it into the gift that we show others how to heal their traumas. We could also have some of our traumas re-imprinted, especially if we're not real clear on what is wounding us, or we're not interested in healing our wounds. Sometimes we will revisit the trauma in order to make it conscious. You know, use the example of the lover leaving us. Well, by the time your lover's left you, a lover has left you a third time, a fourth time, and you're the common denominator. Well, what are you going to start to do about it? It's getting a little old to claim victimization when you're the when you're the common denominator and it happening all the time. Of course, the 11th house, fixed air. Okay, this can bring up any type of mental illnesses, including the fact that we can fragment off mentally in its extremes. It goes to the multiple personality complexes or disorders, but there can be all kinds of the mental illnesses that can come around, you know, even to the point, depending upon what age we have the Chiron transit, it could even include something like a dementia imbalance, which could, in some ways, philosophically, thought to be that this is just one of the ways in which we are winding down a lifetime. We learn how to keep the body alive, but can we keep the mind alive as well? Can we keep the mind healthy and flourishing? This would be something to work on with this house transit. But one of the things that I've really noticed with, you know, any long forecasts through the 11th house, any natal planets in the 11th house, that fixed modality, persevere, okay, status quo, holding on with the element of air, it can create this fixed mental energy where any change just paralyzes us and the mind can go blank. We have a fear of change, and our thinking, our ability to process anything either gets frozen and paralyzed, or we get caught up in that wounded thinking pattern, and we just, you know, it's fixed, so it becomes like circular, and we're in that same fear and all the time, and we can't get out of it. So you can see how we were working with earlier what I call SMEP. When we get into those distorted mental patterns, if we get stuck in them, they will then crystallize into something physical. You know, liver issues are anger. Lower back issues are fear of support. You know, many of you might be familiar with Louise Hayes's book with all of the mental reasons for a physical imbalance and the mental affirmations to heal them. Well, sometimes we've got to have that ability to shake it up with the 11th house. And this can be what Chiron transiting through Aries will want to do here. Aries 11th house, can we get out of that fixed mental thinking? And of course, many of you know from the world of EA that the purpose of Aquarius 11th house and ruler Uranus is to decondition and liberate, to individualize on a soul level. We can have fears around that. Maybe there were prior life attempts to be different and we were ridiculed or persecuted. So now there can be a fear of being different. And Chiron in Aries is going to want to initiate that individualization and liberation process. And how well can we do that? Or are we going to be stuck in our fears and try and pretend to be like everyone else and consent to whatever group we're in the middle of? And of course, if we're not making that effort to individualize, we can experience alienation. And in the 11th house, that alienation, the intent is to get us to embrace our individualization. Of course, many of us may have been ostracized for trying to be different, or maybe we were that avant-garde of the 11th house and we were part of some type of revolutionary thinking or actions, Aries, and you know, here we are revisiting all those wounds, making an effort to heal them, and then making an effort to do it all over again, to be part of leading our group or humanity forward in some level. And of course, because that 11th house is that, you know, fixed air, it's always been, you know, the like-mindedness, and traditional astrology calls it friendship, but it will go beyond that into our societal or cultural groups or our tribes. And so perhaps we experience trauma as a group. You know, we don't have any massacres of groups of people going on in the world today, do we? Myanmar, for instance, unfortunately still going on. So Chiron will sometimes have to help us differentiate. Okay, yes, this was part of a mass trauma that I experienced. Where is my, you know, element of it? Where am I either picking up or feeling responsible for the group getting hurt, and maybe it's not mine to be responsible for. As you can see, there's a lot of variations that can go into just looking at the whole issue of societal wounding and trauma. We can have fears around creativity. The opposite of the 11th house is the 5th, the Leo ruled, or the sun ruled Leo house. And of course it's creativity. So what we can have is all of this mental energy that the 11th house can have. It can stay in the head and we don't ever do anything about it. That can be a chironic wound as well. So how are we going to find that courage with Chiron in Aries to make an effort to move forward creatively in whatever way it is we need to do so? Now, I'm probably not going to, again, create the be-all, end-all list, trying to give you some bullet points here in which you can bounce off of and start to recognize many of the archetypes. And of course, Chiron in Aries as the healer, as the spiritual warrior, they can become the visionary healers. They can bring through new healing methodologies. They can bring through various telepathic gifts. In other words, they can have the clairaudience where they can hear things coming through. They can have it be on the telepathic level as well. And of course, we can have the leaders come through with this transit through the 11th house. They do find their courage. They find their courage to be a group of one, to be the leader of moving through some new healing method or some new way of social justice for the tribe or the culture, etc. So, you know, this house transit can really set some of those healers in motion on how they're going to be active on planet Earth to some degree. All right, so now I'm going to move into an actual chart that we're going to look at with Chiron transiting the 11th house in Aries. And so I'm going to rattle off the environmental conditioning. Leroy, you can bring our volunteer on if you would like to unmute.
Yes, hello.
Taking a drink of water while I got a break.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I had to drink water when I rattled through these webinars.
No, I bet. It's so awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. So let me rattle off a little bit and then I'm going to jump right into you, okay?
Okay.
So I just want everybody to know that you came from an Irish Catholic family on both sides. You went to Catholic school, entrenched in Catholicism. You have one older sister. However, that sister and your father are both deceased. You had a blue-collar, lower-class upbringing. You've never married. However, you've been in a 9-year intimate relationship. No children, and you work as an astrologer and a spiritual counselor. So I'm amazed at some of the background similarities between you and our 12th house volunteer. You're both going to be 4th house Plutos. And by the way, I'm going to point out to everybody that you practice with whole signs. And so am I understanding this correctly? Whole signs, whatever your ascendant was, it was 20-something Gemini, I think it was. But when whole signs, you just move it to 0 degrees. And then you have equal houses going all the way around the 12 houses. Okay?
Yes.
And of course, evolutionary astrology works with any house system. All right. So just clarifying that for everybody. But we have a 4th house Pluto in Virgo, And of course, you were born in the 60s. We have a Chiron in Aries. So you have that Uranus new phase Pluto. There are 6 Chironic aspects in case you're not aware of this, okay? Pointing them out for you. Chiron is a full phase opposition to Uranus. So even though the signs are different, it is still within orb of being an opposition. And of course, we have these 3 inner planets in early Cancer, second house, Mars, Sun, Venus, all making a waxing square to Chiron. Jupiter is almost making a waxing in conjunct to Chiron over here in the 4th from 1 degree Virgo. And Chiron is applying to a waxing sesquisquadrate to Neptune. Square and a half. It's just a degree away from shifting from first quarter to gibbous phase. Now, Chiron's ruler by sign is Mars, square Chiron. Chiron's ruler by house, Uranus, is opposing Chiron. So we have Chiron in aspect to the 2 planets that rule it. Okay, so that brings in a little bit of emphasis as well to your Chiron archetype. Now, instead of me just rattling off, I'll make sure that I get some things in here. I'd just like to hear from you and your own experience with, you not only have Chiron, getting ready to transit the 11th house, you have Chiron natally in the 11th house in Aries. So we got a double signature going on here. Might make it easier for interpretations. You don't have to blend things. You got the same thing going on. But because you have a little experience in astrology, I would just like to hear from you, your impression of your Chironic signature. Comfortable? Can you give me some feedback?
Yes, thank you so much. I'd be happy to give feedback. I think especially when watching the previous slide, as far as like the past life trauma and like the negative thinking and getting really caught up in that, as an astrologer, I knew Chiron was I was having my Chiron return soon, and that's why I was like, I need to be on this webinar. I hope she picks my chart, because it's been so hard. It has not been easy to have this particular Chiron. I think especially with it squaring or waxing squaring my Mars, Sun, Venus down there in Cancer in the 2nd house. But when I first was learning astrology, I did it the Placidius houses, and until I moved it to whole sign, then I got a really much more deepened awareness of that Chiron energy, because I was always like, growing up, it was like, I never wanted to stand out. It was way too scary. I would like sacrifice my intelligence to not be the smartest kid in the class. I wanted to be with the group. I didn't want to be separated out. And I've always been like really super connected to like the family, like home and mom and dad, and just feeling safe there. Even in early college, like when I first got my own apartment, like I lived by myself for the first time, I almost, looking back, I was like, gosh, I was borderline agoraphobic, where I did not feel safe going out, or didn't feel safe not either in a group of friends or being with friends, or it was really interesting time. I didn't live very long by myself. I didn't live by myself for very long. But it really, this feeling of feeling unsafe. And then earlier when you said about, traumatic car accident, things like that, I did have a traumatic car accident when I was at my first Saturn square with my father, who's also, I'm born on his birthday too. So we have like a big past life karma thing, and I loved him to pieces. And, he just recently passed away. So he was not here for my Chiron return, which I think is really interesting, the timing. But yes, always, it wasn't until I got to college, or I kind of went through there and found my own sense of identity, that I felt I could finally get out of that group, like hiding in a group. But it's taken really since my Uranus opposition in my early 40s, that's when things started to change. Like I really started to feel less and less afraid. But I was seriously, my friends would have to drag me out of the house because being in Cancer, I was happy at home. But I didn't realize that I was so happy at home because I was really, really afraid of just maybe the world at large. But also having this sense of that, kind of, getting into more of the alternative healings and things like that throughout my time. But it wasn't really until I started swimming with the wild dolphins in the Big Island that I think all the sonar, I've had about 100 swims so far, but that experience like shifted either my way of thinking that I've kind of got out of that spell of feeling so afraid. And so really like, because my mindset, like you mentioned, was like that almost, if I didn't have like the grace of God following me around, I think I would have been on antidepressants and, probably would have been diagnosed with these mental disorders that were really, I think when I love the SMEP, it's all spiritual, or getting coalesced in that mental space and then having all the emotions that crystallize it. And yeah, that's why I was just so happy that you were having this webinar. And then when you picked my chart, I was like, oh my God, finally freedom. I'll just know, because I know this 8 years is going to be huge.
Yeah, you're gonna move through it a lot. Well, we're looking at the whole chart here, okay? So, coming of a first house Pluto with this, Chiron signature, Uranus signature, still pretty close conjunction. This is going to be trauma in the home and family, okay? And this is going to be reiterated with these 3 planets in Cancer square to the Chiron. And what I'm picking up on, and intuitively with this, Chiron Aries 11th house square, Mars, Sun, Venus, Cancer second, is lifetimes and lifetimes in which you possibly didn't live out a childhood. You didn't make it to adulthood. And again, this is reiterated. You've got 3 planets in the fourth house. Okay, so the home and family. So sometimes this is not only just woundedness with a or both parents. Okay, it can also be woundedness in your own early child environment. And if it wasn't the current environment, okay, maybe it's happened enough in past lives that you actually got a cocoony lifetime this time to try and help you make the attempts to do some of this healing work down here that's so emotionally traumatized from early childhood. As you've been able to have that little cocoon, it's then allowed this Aries Chiron to start to initiate breaking out 11th house into the world and starting to explore and starting to just go, wait a minute, I've got to live. I've got to go out there and be in the world, And so I don't know how much past life regression work you've done or not, but, this Cancer second house, it's, again, just these signatures alone sometimes, but reiterated with a 4th house Pluto and reiterated the square to Chiron. Wounding in the early environment this lifetime. And if not, then wounding in childhood environments many lifetimes. Now, if you want to, you could also bring in the fact that your structure of consciousness, Saturn, okay, is over here 24 degrees Aries. The North Node at 15 Aries has just crossed over it in the 11th house. This is new beginnings. This is really, how do I break free to be me? So while your structure of consciousness can be very self-focused Aries, it can be traumatized in the focus on self. And it's possible that it could be another one of those signatures of, well, I never got to grow up. Okay, even Another possibility that could go on here, and we're looking at the Uranus conjunction to Pluto here, okay? And it's in Virgo, and we're looking at, you know, Chiron North Node Saturn up here in Aries 11th house. It's even possible that in past lives, perhaps you had some type of head injury that affected your ability to mentally process. It could also then have affected your ability with these squares to the Cancer planets to emotionally mature. So the ability to move forward, to, you know, Aries, initiate, to process mental and emotionally. There's a possibility that that's part of the wounding that's under the surface. And so, have you done any past life regression work?
You know, I have, and I need to do more, but I have, and it's interesting because my sister, she passed away at 35, and one of the past life regressions when I was, and then she passed away on my Saturn return when I was 20, just turned 29, or about to turn 29, and one of the things was that we had like this karmic agreement where she also had a hard time staying in the body. And this is part of what I experienced from the regression, and that this time she chose to leave the body and I would stay and kind of carry on whatever, or kind of double, because I have my Mercury retrograde conjunct my ascendant, like 1 degree conjunct, and there's all of this stuff about her, and you know, that's been like almost, now it's 20 years now, but yeah, so they said that, and I had like guilt because she lived and I didn't, because usually I think I'm the one to go. Yeah, but yeah, I have felt that this life has been cushy, even though I was, when I was 7, I was in a really bad car accident. The only time I've ever been hurt physically was I had a head injury, and it was a bump on the head because I hit the dashboard in the car accident. It was with my dad, and if my sister had been in the car, she probably would have died, because I was smaller, so I fell under the dashboard.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
so we had this, interesting stuff with my sister, who's like maybe a twin, I don't know, some soulmate. But yeah, and I always felt like even my mom would be really kind of, if I ever left the house, she would have to know where I was going, when I was going to be back. It was always this like underlying fear that I wouldn't come back.
Well, yeah, there's, okay, 2 things here. Okay, so 4th house Pluto and all your Cancer stuff, of course, that's going to bring up the family of origin things, okay, that are going on. You know, another area of possible wounding, okay, you have no children. I never had biological children either, and I wanted them when I was young, and I made peace with it. And then when I got into a lot of my past life regression work, I realized, oh, wait a minute, I've had so many lifetimes of losing children. I decided if I don't have kids, I can't lose them. And there was nothing I was conscious of until my past life regression work. So it is possible with these Cancer planets in the 2nd house as well. There's a wounding around the children. There's a wounding around having children or having lost children as well. And, you know, possibly dying young with your children could be part of that whole picture. But let's move on and look at this transit, okay? Because I think we've got a little bit of background, and I think we've got some ideas of some of this chironic signature here. Of what needs to be healed. I mean, the beauty of the Chiron return for you as it comes is that you can just break free from so much all the way through. You know, Chiron is going to be starting its 2nd transit through the 11th house. Of course, the first time around, it was from 0 to, 7, 8 degrees for you. And yes, you had that head injury, maybe why Chiron was going over Saturn and Aries. But as it transits now, this is going to be a 2nd time around for you. There's so much freedom that's potentially there. Of course, we know that. But what you have to be ready for is all kinds of unconscious stuff just popping up of its own volition.
Okay.
That is the 11th house. It's the individuated unconsciousness. And so when a planet, and especially a longer term planet, moves through there, everything, you know, it's like ripping that mental veil off. And this wound, this trauma, that trauma, they're all popping up. And it's kind of like, you know, all over the place as Uranus energy works. It doesn't, you know, come up in an ABC fashion. And so as some memory or some image or some, you know, you could even include the dream world here, but as something from the unconscious pops up, you just want to observe it. You know, can you do that Aquarian 11th house detachment and just look at it and go, oh, I wonder what that means. Oh, I wonder what this means. And just the whole process of just asking, what's this about? What's this mean? Why is this happening? That will energize the chironic energy to, you know, just spontaneously, Aries, come up with what is necessary for healing. Oh, that's why that has affected me. Oh, that's why I've always needed to be cocooned at home and I was afraid to go out in the world. Oh, because when I was out there, I got hurt.
Right?
But you know, Chiron's transit, just not only your chironic return, which won't be till next year, and you will have it 3 times. Sometimes we get 2 Chiron retrogrades and we get 5 hits. You're only going to have the 3, okay, 1 retrograde cycle. But you know, you just really want to be energizing. How do I be free to be me?
Okay.
Because as a 4th house Pluto, a Cancer soul, you know, it's that 10th house polarity of taking charge of your life in each and every way possible. That's your soul's intent. And so Chiron in the 11th wants to be freeing you up to do whatever you want to do. It wants you to heal any of those emotional wounds of that 4th house as well. You've got the Chiron-Uranus opposition from Uranus, Virgo, 4th house. And then Chiron transiting that 11th house, it's going to go over your North Node. Oh, how do I be emotionally free? How do I move forward with my own emotional courage? Chiron in Aries is going to transit over your Saturn in Aries 11th house as well. And that's, you know, it's the maturation process. And for you, that maturation process is to, again, just be utterly free to go wherever you want. You've got to carry your home within your emotional body, not where you're physically located. You've got to be able to feel safe wherever you go. And look at how Chiron, natal Chiron, remember I said natal Chiron is making a waxing sesquisquadrate to Neptune. And your Neptune is over here, 24 Scorpio, 6th house retrograde, okay? And so that first quarter to gibbous phase, it's starting to turn you inward in regards to your relationship with Source, Chiron to Neptune, all right? And having you heal any of the emotional wounding, Neptune and Scorpio, so that you can find, you know, that inner courage to trust the universe, to then trust yourself. So that Chiron transit through the 11th house, there's another thing about, you know, forecasting planets through the 11th. It accelerates the space-time mechanism. It makes us feel that, you know, Saturn Capricorn 10th is so much space-time, and we feel like we're stuck and it just won't go fast enough. 11th house does the opposite. It feels like it speeds up time. And so that then translates into, when we're doing our healing work, being able to heal faster.
Oh, wow.
Being able to break free from things and actually liberate ourselves. I mean, you've Aries on that 11th house is, again, while I can signify the traumas as your own child, traumas with children, trauma with family, square to the Cancer, it also gives a lot of energy to break into being that spiritual warrior. I know what it's like to be wounded and hurt, 11th house. And as I heal that, I know how to stand up for others so nobody gets hurt again. That type of energy is what wants to bust out. That's the healing energy that comes from healing the wound. You've got, you know, again, your natal Uranus Pluto trauma signature, your natal Chiron there, and squaring these Cancers. You know what it's like to be hurt, to be wounded. And so, you know, your greatest gift is to be that fighter for everyone else, to stand up for justice. And again, as I've said throughout this Chironic series, it does not mean that you know, need to be marching in the street unless that's what you want to do. But it means that you really want to learn how to hold that healing energy of Chiron.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that is.
It's kind of
so
like
my God.
Good questions with what I'm saying.
Yeah, because I've been feeling that for a little while, because I have taken steps to move forward, like but all in the kind of 11th house kind of way of social media and the internet. But yet I'm still working from home. I'm in the confines of the safety part, but I feel like now it's like, yeah, I've met the surface level of it, but I'm supposed to go much, much deeper, and to find that space to bring forth the healing, like either, you know, doing a lot of past life regression and getting into that, like when you said to trust the universe, is really like, that's kind of where I want to go with this.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, on an ultimate level, it really is you feeling free enough to just go out there and do whatever, so that you're not, you know, held back, so to speak. You know, yes, it's quite possible, being a 4th house Pluto, that it is really comfortable for you to do it in your safe space. But that ultimate freedom of Chiron Aries in the 11th house is being able to be in the group, to be in the crowd, and to be yourself in a group of people. Because there can be trauma of being singled out, Aries, in the group. And it could have had nothing, you know, you could have not been the leader. You could have just been one in the group, but somehow somebody pointed their finger at you and made you the persecution example. Okay. So again, that fear of standing out. And so Chiron Aries 11th house transit, you've got to be able to be free in the group. Okay. So you know, and you can do the Pluto 4th house baby steps. 2 step forward, 1 step back. 2 step forward, 1 step back. I was kind of the opposite. I got involved in environmental politics in my late 20s, and I literally put all my belongings in a storage unit and pretty much lived out of my suitcase, out of the goodness of other people's homes, while I just became a real rabble rouser in my state for the environment. I called it my Peace Corps days. And
Wow.
so I proved to myself that I could go out there and do it. So now I say, okay, been there, done that. It's okay. I can have a life, and I can have a home and a family, because I've done those Peace Corps days, as I call it. That would be like an ultimate, ideal, but I'm not telling you to do the same thing that I've done. I'm just saying to find that type of courage to be uniquely who you are, and to explore becoming who you are as you have the feedback from the culture or group, 11th house. Does that make sense? You understand that?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it just gives me like, it kind of eases, because I've been feeling that kind of little bit of anxiety, that I know that it's coming, and I don't want to like either mess it up or miss it. I want to go into it consciously.
Well, and because you're going to have a Chiron return here. Yeah. Every one of these Chiron aspects that I pointed out, okay, each one of these are going to be activated. Now, Jupiter, as you can see at 1 Virgo, it's 2 degrees from waxing in conjunct, which is the inner adjustments, okay? And so what your Jupiter is doing here in early Virgo in the beginning of the 4th house, okay? It's really having you open up and learn how to process through, create emotional self-reliance, how to create your own internal security, okay? And it's really triggered by the Uranian wounds. And so you might study this waxing in conjunct aspect a little bit as well. And you can feel that. I mean, you can feel everything with Chiron being activated when you have this Chiron return.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're really having to Chiron to Neptune establish, this deepening of and expanding of your relationship with Source, to trust Source in order to trust the universe. And as you do that, then the Jupiter in conjunct to Chiron and the inner planet squares to Chiron will allow you to develop that inner security, emotional self-reliance within you. So you carry it with you wherever you are, whatever you're doing, wherever you go.
And right, because the home is within me, not in a structure, but within myself.
Yes. That's the ultimate 4th house Pluto.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay. This is
okay.
So helpful.
Help?
Yes.
Yeah. Questions on anything?
So because the Uranus opposition to Chiron in the 11th house gives it the double signature, because it's the ruler of the 11th house. Uranus.
Yes. Uranus and Mars are the rulers of Chiron, and one's opposing Chiron and the other one is squaring Chiron. So they are in a wide T-square. They're still there, Mars is a last quarter square to Uranus.
So would I be utilizing like the power even though Mars is in the fall in Cancer, but I would kind of tune into that as far as looking for like, that energy to break through and break free and find that space to have courage, or more courage.
Yes, but what Mars is trying to do, and from evolutionary astrology, we don't use exaltations and falls, etc. No judgments, okay? Because every planet can be in all 12 archetypes, and it's just, how does that express? How does that archetype distort? How does that archetype express? Okay, so you also have Mars in Taurus. you're half a Cancer, you're half a Taurus with the second house.
Oh, okay, right.
You know,
Forgot that part.
I preach that constantly. Don't forget the house.
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay.
So think about Mars in the second house. You know, give yourself a little courage for trying to find some self-reliance and survival skills and, you know, talents in the world. But Mars is a last quarter square to Uranus. So you're trying to release last quarter square, crises in consciousness, releasing old beliefs. Well, you can also, with Mars, you're trying to release old actions around feeling secure. You know,
Okay.
Cancer and second house are both passive polarity. Okay. And so this stellium right here in Cancer is really trying to learn how to feel secure within itself.
Okay.
And it relates to this fourth house soul. But these three planets, you know, Venus is almost outside of orb, but it's you know, 9 degrees, okay, beyond the last quarter square, but it gets tugged into it via the Sun and Mars. Of, you know, really, we're trying to shed old emotional traumas around security with Uranus, Virgo fourth, having it ripped out from underneath you. And so it can be another reiteration of, okay, I can have it taken away physically, but that doesn't mean it's taken away inwardly. And that's your shift. That's the huge shift. And as you recognize that through this square, then the freedom of Chiron comes in. Oh, I'm really creating security on the deepest inner levels so that I can go with anything that shifts in the physical world and still be free.
And still be free. Yeah, no matter what's happening on the outside world.
Yes.
Okay.
Still initiate moving forward, growing, living, loving, learning.
Wow. Cool. I need to take your whole EA course. I'm signing up.
Well, thank you. I've just had a few years to read charts.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I am so appreciative and grateful for this reading. Thank you so much.
Well, you are most welcome, and I probably better be conscious of time and move forward. So thank you for being willing to allow us to use your chart as an example.
Very welcome.
And you bet. Anybody who's out there listening, any questions that come up, you know, you can always just get on that Q&A panel with Leroy or ask to be unmuted to ask questions. No problem with that. But let's move ourselves on then, okay, for the next house. And so we've come full circle. And so when we look at Chiron and Aries moving through the 12th house, it's like a double signature to finish up the last 8 years of Chiron in Pisces, or however long it's been in there, 2010, 11 through 2018, 19. Yeah, it's been about 8 years. 12th house, here we're starting to work with passive polarity, mutable modality, and the water element. Passive, mutable water. Doesn't that just sound like you're going to just sink into the ocean? But here we're going to look at wounds with universal source. Whatever we perceive God, Goddess, Great Spirit to be, and coming off of the last 2,000 years of the Piscean age and all the human-made distortions we have with that, coming off of the last 6,000 to 8,000 years of patriarchal distortions, look at all the wounding that is created in our concepts and understandings of what is source. So all of that, what is wounded with that energy, and that means not just this life, but all your lifetimes, basically, many, many past lives. You can have all kinds of those various woundings coming to the surface to initiate healing. Now, one of the most basic ones in regards to wounds with God-Goddess is an inability to trust the universe, to trust that we are safe in the universe. If you look at it from the human-made conditionings that God is perfect and it's a male and he's that old man in the white beard sitting on a cloud judging all of us in our imperfections, you know, and you look around you at the examples that we have in the world of all of this cruelty, how in, you know, bejeebies name do you trust? How do you trust the universe? And so many people that are drawn to evolutionary astrology are drawn for wanting to know and understand natural spiritual principles. And of course, what do we learn from observing, correlating in nature, natural law? Universal source is beyond a gender. It's not male or female, it's an energetic force. Universal source is everywhere, but we know it outside of ourselves to the degree that we know it inside. And the real biggie is universal source is an evolving force. Why would something perfect create this mess? So as we can shift our understanding to natural spiritual principles, then it allows us to recognize the Big Bang and the unmanifest manifested in a desire to perfect itself. And every baby step forward we make, every moment we evolve, Source itself evolves. It's co-creative. And when we start to learn and understand that, we recapture our ability to trust ourselves, to trust our own intuition, to trust Source, to trust in the universe. And so that is the biggest thing that Chiron, transiting through the 12th house, wants to bring about and or expand upon. Now, because it is water, because it is the last of the 12 houses, it includes everything that came before in the prior 11 archetypes, the prior 11 houses. So we don't know where we end or another begins. And so there can be all those wounds with unhealthy boundaries and a sense of who we are. What's my shit? What's your shit? We have no healthy boundary with that. And we create that with that 6th house polarity. And because it is the closest thing that we have in astrology, it includes ruler Neptune as the totality of consciousness, unconsciousness, or what we would know to be source or that search for source. You know, this brings in that collective consciousness, unconsciousness on the broadest levels. It brings in all of the psychic energy. It brings in the ultimate telepathy. It brings in all of those type of healing gifts and abilities. Well, patriarchal distortions, we can have psychic wounds and traumas. We can have, you know, woundedness towards trusting our psychic abilities. And if we have a low ego, if we have a weak ego or sense of self, then it can ultimately lead to separating forces, playing with our psyche, playing with our sense of self. In its extremes, it can lead to oh God, what do they call it when, you know, entities take over your body, that type of thing. And so this is where we have to heal the ego. Jesus, the evolved human, had an ego. So we've got to heal that, and we've got to learn how to ground in our body as well as walk in the spiritual world. And what can happen is if we have these wounds to our psyche, this leads to those escapisms. Okay, and it doesn't have to go to the extreme of other beings taking over your body. It can just be, oh, it's too hard to be here on Earth. I think I'm just going to read a book. You know, I'm just going to, you know, of course you can see where all the addiction issues come from with substances. So we can, you know, want to escape or leave the body. And again, Chiron's healing is to ground us in the body, to worship the temple the soul resides in, and to be able to be the spiritual being in the human experience. Now, we don't need to go into the sadomasochistic distortions. You probably are familiar with those if you've been studying EA anytime, but you can have all kinds of persecution woundings. You could, excuse me, you could have the extreme of the sadist or the victor. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me, and those would be atonements. The persecutions would be standing up for ourselves instead of feeling so helpless. And of course, when I look at addiction, a lot of us tend to take addiction out on a physical level, you know, drugs, alcohol, food, but addictions can be emotional, codependencies upon another person. They can be mental addictions. I can't think for myself. I've got to do whatever somebody else tells me to do, maybe even my teacher or guru. And it can be, you know, spiritual addiction issues. One of them could be an overtistic ego. We use the example in second stage spirituated of where there has to be a realignment. You're not God. You think you can play God. You know, there can be the addiction issues can exist: spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. So you've got to do the observe correlate when it's 12th house, Pisces, or Neptune aspects, because again, the archetype includes all 11 that came before. It can go anywhere. So when I see a lot of that in a chart, 12th house, Pisces, or Neptune, I do a lot of questions, a lot of Q&A to try and really observe where that energy is experiencing itself. Now, there can be extreme sensitivities and just woundedness, you know, is sensitive to huge groups of people. We go from the 11th house of how big can you make your tribe to the 12th house. It goes back to you and God or goddess, you know. So, you know, we want to hold the big circle, but we then also have to go back to myself and source to rebirth into first house. So that sensitivities, yes, can come to substances and food allergies that, you know, you could work to heal with Chiron's transit here, but it can also just come to through sensitivities to other energies as well. Feeling the pain of Gaia with climate change and needing to be able to go, okay, it's okay to be healthy in myself. I hear your pain, I feel your pain, and I give your pain to source, because source will help you heal so much better than I can. So being able to discern what you can heal and what you cannot heal is something here with this transit. And of course, depending on where we are, there are some times where it can ultimately be the death of the body. But by all means, Chiron and Aries can have death of the body through all 12 houses, okay? Don't think that it's going to skip a house. Sometimes there can be hard to diagnose health issues. And this is where I said, you know, talking a little bit about my SMEP concept, you know, everything sources from a disconnect to source. And so you can have, you know, this is where astrology becomes a good astrological detective, working with planets and their health and wellness rulerships and signs, houses, to, you know, try and work to figure out where this health imbalance is coming from physically, and then taking it up emotionally, mentally, spiritually to make that connection with source. But the other thing that can happen with this house transit is just spontaneous, miraculous healings. Something clicked between you and source, And as we've said with this house archetype, sometimes source just dissolves things, so you have no substitute for a relationship with it. And when you deepen that relationship with source energy, what would you have me know, source? What would you have me know, source? It just comes along into that spontaneous reconnection, spontaneous melting into self-love, and a spontaneous healing of something that's manifested physically. And then those who have been through these wounds and have really, really work with grounding in their body and balancing being in the spirit world and in the physical world, some of the most gifted healers on the planet have 12th house energy. Planets in the 12th or Pisces or a lot of aspects to Neptune. So Chiron in Aries transiting through the 12th house is going to awaken, make conscious all these types of archetypes. And it doesn't mean you have to do every one of them, but whichever ones are going to come through. And Chiron and Aries transiting through the 12th house, and especially coming off of this Pisces transit, boy, we've all been trying to do these issues right here to some degree. And so as we've all been trying to really work on that unconditional self-love, which is unconditional love with source through our imperfections, those healings then really allow us to initiate how we're going to rebirth as the healer. And this will then be specific to those souls who have Chiron and Aries transiting the 12th house. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to take another big drink of water, and Leroy, our volunteer for the 12th house, was going to be calling in via phone. So I'm going to move over and show the chart as I take a drink of water and see if you can connect with this person on the phone.
Volunteer, are you there?
Hello?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We can hear you, sweetie.
Oh, you can. Great.
Yes, 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 you got in.
Yay!
Yes, thank you. Hello, it's good to talk to you again, honey.
I know. It's great.
I like following you on Facebook, okay? This volunteer is my social.
I like thinking
Go
of
ahead.
you up there on that cold place.
I want you to know that it was 60-some degrees today, and I actually got an hour or two out in the yard today.
Wow!
Oh, I know, but boy, it's been a cold winter, and guess what? We're supposed to get 12 inches of snow this weekend, as we just got everything to melt. So we don't always get the headlines.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I know where you live. You live the same area my girlfriend lives. I know. I'm used to it. But anyway, what was I going to, something else I was going to say. Oh, it'll come in. Let me quickly get some things in. Another volunteer who was raised with Catholicism, this one on a farm. This one had a father who was a rageaholic. In addition to being an alcoholic, he also was an adulterer, which I imagine created some chaos in the home, as the volunteers shared. Family all found out. He also was quite racist. And you had some situations with him when you dated a different race than yourself, which is Caucasian. Your volunteer was kind of promiscuous early on in life until she got sober. And so she has been sober from alcohol for 36 years. We have another volunteer who's never married, no kids, same partner for 30 years. Career background, she was a special ed teacher, and then she started and ran a nonprofit for 20 years. She was involved in several nonprofits, and she finally was able to release some of her alcohol workaholism Any addictions in that environmental conditioning, huh? There you go, workaholic. There's the physical addiction. But was able to release some of the workaholism upon her second Saturn return. She's also an astrologer. We also have a fourth house Pluto here, but a different generation. We've got the Pluto in Leo generation, and she's got that Saturn new phase Pluto, which came along in the late 40s. Both of these planets are retrograde, okay? This volunteer also has 6 aspects to her Chiron. Chiron's over here conjunct the South Node in Scorpio 6th house. South Node is balsamic Chiron. It is not in, the nodes move retrograde backwards through the zodiac, so this is not a new phase conjunction. This is South Node balsamic conjunction Chiron. This is really bringing about a desire, Scorpio, to heal old emotional wounding, just South Node, but perhaps heal old emotional wounding with intimacy or any betrayals of trust. Think all the Scorpio words. To heal old emotional wounding around any self-worth issues with the 6th house, perhaps with some environment issues. You know, this person has had a lot of work in being of service, being a teacher, running a nonprofit. So she's worked through a lot of that healing, perhaps in the work environment, 6th house. Now, the ruler of Chiron by sign is Saturn, and it's over here, square Chiron, okay? And the ruler of Chiron by house is Mercury, and Mercury's up here at Sag, 20 degrees in the 7th, and it is opposing Uranus retrograde from the 1st, 23 degrees Gemini. And that ruler of Chiron by house, Mercury, is also having a T-square with the moon at 29.5 degrees Pisces. So her rulers of Chiron are quite active in the chart, and Saturn is square the nodes over here as well. So Chiron, Saturn has a last quarter square to Chiron. And let me see if I missed any Chiron aspects for you. Just a moment. Chiron does have, it's just, the moon is just moving out of an orb of trine to Chiron. So it's a wide orb. It's just shy of 10 degrees, but you can still call that energy in, so it can, you know, look at it from a little bit of a relief point rather than just the T-square to the Mercury-Uranus opposition. And then Chiron has a nice sextile with Venus going on up here at 25 degrees Capricorn. Volunteer, what I'd like to do is, as you've been listening, I'd like to just hear from you, your perception of your natal Chiron. You know your story. Would you care to share?
Okay. Well, definitely you pick up the 6th house feeling of inadequacy, but it was particularly around, I think, the issues of am I enough, in the sense of when I got to be adolescent, was I enough of a girl? Was I enough of a sexual partner? Was I enough, you know, because I never thought that I possibly could be. So my whole life, from the time I was very young, was to take on leadership roles.
Mm-hmm.
I did that. I mean, it was almost like an addiction to leadership. There was never a vacuum. If I was around and somebody needed something, you know, can somebody take on this? Oh yeah, I just took on the responsibility. And I think that's the Saturn relationship there too. But it was like I was just always overburdening myself, taking on more and more all the time.
Do you think some of it was a compensation for a sense of inadequacy?
Yes, because I could just always be trying to prove that I could do anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to do everything. You know, I just always felt like I was supposed to keep my parents together. I was supposed to be the smartest kid in the class. I was supposed to, you know, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot. It was a lot. It was a big burden.
Were you an only child?
No, I was the youngest of three.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
But
instead of
I still had this. I still had this triangular relationship with my parents, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Which came out when I got sober and I finally got into some, you know, therapy. It became real obvious.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what you may have done coming off of being a fourth house Pluto, and as you had shared, you know, father was not only alcoholic, father was an adulterer, and family knew about it. So I think you took on a lot of the family of origin wounding, and at the same time we're kind of like, okay, I'm going to be the warrior and heal this, and never gave yourself a chance to look at how that might be impacting you or where you might be wounding. So the Chiron sixth house inadequacy, then, you know, taking charge, you know, created even more wounding for yourself because you were doing more than you could do as a child. And then in adulthood, you know, the workaholism, you know, not taking time to just take care. Chiron in the sixth, and especially if we look at Barbara Hand Clow saying that has, you know, Chiron has rulership of Virgo sixth house, you know, not taking the time to do your own diet, exercise, rest, not taking time to make sure that you have that mental rest, sixth house, that can sometimes be necessary when we work so much. So I think, you know, and if we look at a planet conjunct South Node, we got fruition, we got relive, and we got perhaps the mixture of both. And so I'm looking at your environmental conditioning and I go, oh gosh, she just sacrificed herself, you know, being a teacher and running her nonprofit. And I was looking at it from the perspective of, oh, she just is out there doing so much. And now I'm listening to you and it's like, oh, wait a minute. You were running yourself ragged. And perhaps somewhere, you know, you bought into the wound, Chiron, that I'm not worthy of, sixth house. And
it's interesting though too, Kimmery, that I had one of my other addictions, if you can call it that, has been to be free to do whatever I wanted to do. And so I kept telling myself that I was doing what I wanted to do.
I would say that's probably that Saturn new phase Pluto in Leo. You know, all the fourth house sensitivity of home and family and all that emotional psychic energy of South Node Chiron in Scorpio. You're telling yourself that story at the same time. Were you really free?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. As we look at Chiron now moving through the 12th house, of course, let's just revisit here as we've been doing with some of these charts with Chiron. You know, we just got done talking about the 11th house. You've had that transit there for a few years. You get to have Chiron over your moon in Pisces 3 times this year. Ooh, so there's some opportunity. do you by any chance have either parent still alive?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Gratefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I
even
know that sounds terrible, but I am so happy I don't.
it's okay. It's all right, fourth house Pluto. um, you know, you can. I'm gonna say you're still gonna be doing your own inner emotional healing, Chiron over the moon. You're gonna be having perhaps some memories with mom pop up, or some, psychic or spiritual conversations with mom. There's always another layer to peel off the onion, and that moon rules your soul by house, Cancer soul, Pluto fourth. So, it's going to start for you finishing up in Pisces to just do as much emotional healing as you can, getting to as much emotional objectivity as you can. You're going to have almost half of that Aries cycle dealing with everything we just spoke about in the last 11th house slide, okay? We don't need to revisit that. But then as Chiron goes into that 12th house, I'm like, how do you want to be the healer? Coming off of your personal history, do you want to just have the freedom to heal yourself?
Well, the 12th house to me is a little complicated in that way, because that's where the North Node is. And I feel like since my second Saturn return, I have been moving more and more into that 12th house. I never recognized the level of introversion that's in my soul. But I do now. And when you were talking about, the idea of sensitivity to large groups of people, or, taking on, other people's stuff. Well, having a Pisces moon, you kind of do that anyway, but I just cannot be in a crowd now.
There you go.
Literally makes me sick. Sixth house. So the kind of, I'm very grateful for, being able to run healing circles via the phone, and being able to do some mentorship and a little coaching and so on the phone, as well as astrological readings and things like that. Not that I don't love people and love being with them, but it's got to be in a calm setting.
Yeah. Fourth house Pluto. You've South Node Chiron Scorpio. You've had enough crisis situations in your life. I would say it might be emphasized with Chiron just getting ready to move over this moon. I mean, it's got to have had the first passage over it right now. And so, yes, that is something, even though the 12th house can be such that we can be very gifted as the healer and helper in some way, the 12th house also has to honor when to be out there and when to recharge, when to go inward. Okay. And that's something that's going to be unique to every person who has Chiron transiting the 12th house, and it'll be unique regardless of the sign. And so you're going to feel this push-pull with Aries to go out there and be active or do something. And yet that 12th house is going to pull you inward as often. And it's just going to be honoring that flow however it's necessary for you. And yes, with your North Node signature, and we should point out to everybody that, Saturn is square the nodes, real tight square, and the resolution node is the North Node in the 12th house. So for you, your structure of consciousness and your self-responsibility is to really learn how to honor your quiet times, Taurus in the 12th house. To honor when you do need to cocoon and recharge and be alone. And so, yes, I think that this Chiron transit over time for you, like I said, it'll lead you out and it'll lead you in, and both are okay. Both are okay, and it really will, you know, be about honoring the whole freedom of however that feels necessary for you.
Well, it certainly feels like going out on the mountaintop, you know, almost literally with that Taurus North Node. I mean, the nature part of it just feels so strong.
Oh, yeah. And coming off of a natal Chiron in the 6th house in Scorpio, I imagine you were a powerhouse worker. And
yep.
Maybe, you know, maybe who knows if there was some, you know, natural guilt driving something, or if it was just all those, you know, compensation factors, you know, because of the lack of. But either way, with your natal Chiron signature, that transiting Chiron Aries 12th house, the initiation may be that mountaintop. You know, I would say that you've earned it. And I don't even want to say you need to earn it, but it's like, okay, been there, done that. And, you know, initiating that 10th house polarity point of taking charge for your life is, you're at that point in your life, you know, honoring the body, Chiron in the 6th. You're at that point where taking charge of your life is bringing you the freedom to do whatever you want. And you may surprise yourself with the flashes of healing that come through 12th house. The flashes of intuitive awareness that comes through in the 12th house. And oh, by the way, you know, Chiron Aries 12th house, your initiations as a healer could be what I had said, you know, helping Gaia feel more balanced. I mean, Jiminy's, what if every person on planet Earth visualized nature healthy? It would happen. And just because you're one person, doesn't mean your effort doesn't count. So, yeah, you can definitely go into nature and talk to the fairies all day.
Well, and they're starting to talk back. I think that's another thing that's happening in the 12th house. But, you know, the trees, I mean, I talk to them regularly. But it's interesting that you say the healing of Gaia, because for years and years, I was, you know, sort of an on the streets kind of activist, marching in the streets, much like you. And I'm at the place now where my body won't do that.
Yep.
And my spirit tells me I'm not supposed to do that.
There you go.
And I don't know whether that's the Chiron, you know, hitting the moon, or, you know, I'm not sure, but I just feel so strongly that, you know, been there, done that. That's not where I'm supposed to be now.
Yeah, exactly. And that, you know, that's a good one for your Saturn new phase Pluto in Leo to recognize, because, you know, the Pluto in Leos don't ever think they're going to grow old. And you put Saturn in Leo, onto that, and you put it in, you know, trining all these Sag planets up here in your 7th, 8th. you know, there's a free-spirited energy, but there's also an energy that just thinks, okay, I got the life force of, you know, 10 people, and to be able to honor the journey of, you know, getting into the autumn of the years is, you know, we don't all do that. The Pluto and Leo generation doesn't do that. And some of them get a little Aquarian polarity shocks when, oh my God, my body won't do what I want it to do anymore. And, you know, like I said before, I don't even remember what class it was, but, you know, you're the nip tuck generation, not saying you are, but, you know, that energy, you know, consensus carrying it all the way out to the surgeries. And so there may be something about this natal Chiron signature here with Scorpio, 6th house, that has strong self-healing potentials, okay? But it's also had its share of wounding. And sometimes, remember, as we said in the mythology of Chiron the centaur, you know, immortal, couldn't heal itself and had to surrender to the ultimate healing, which was leaving the body. Well, how about honoring the process of aging? You know, there's not, we don't honor that in our culture, westernized. And so I think that it's part of Chiron over your moon right now. And I think it's a jump start into all of that 12th house energy with Chiron over your moon. Who knows? There may be something that comes along in some personal freedom ways, Aries, that allows you to continue being part of a healer, but it may just be really being able to honor yourself after driving yourself so hard for so long. It may be just being able to honor yourself and rejoicing your humanism on planet Earth while you're here.
Do you suppose that's why I just had that car accident with Jupiter sitting on Chiron?
I didn't. Okay, I may have heard that, but I may not know it. I follow too much on Facebook. Okay, yes, we have transiting Jupiter there on Chiron 3 times. And your south node. Tell me about this car accident.
Well, it happened on February 16th, and I got T-boned in a, you know, going through a very busy intersection. Somebody, you know, ran the red light, trashed me on the driver's side. And so I've been kind of trying to recover since then. It's been about a month. And
I do remember this now off of Facebook.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that 12 years ago, I had the same thing happen. And hello, that's Jupiter sitting there again. And I mean, it's just amazing to me that, I mean, I keep saying to Source, what am I supposed to be learning about this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I didn't die. I didn't break anything, but my car is trashed and I'm in a lot of pain. So here we are again.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so were you hurt 12 years ago when it happened? Did you have physical hurts then?
Just, you know, like the soft tissue damage that takes a long time and that in some ways lasts forever. You know, when some of those things, you know, do last and you just have to deal with them. But, you know, I feel I'm going to get back to my 25 miles a week. Don't worry.
Yeah. I'm just getting, what I'm picking up on is the universe just saying, okay, you've got to, you know, slow down, honor yourself. Boy, that's real interesting to have Jupiter do it twice. I'm going to ask anybody who's out there listening, any hits on that, any feedback on that. I mean, I think it's kind of an emotional wake-up call too, because it's Jupiter and Scorpio, and Jupiter and Scorpio on Chiron. So it's the fact that, you know, I'm not saying you didn't get hurt, but it was, to me, what I'm hearing is the emotional shock.
Oh, the trauma has been really difficult.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The emotional trauma. That it's been far worse than the physical pain, and that was bad enough.
Yeah. So as Chiron goes back and forth over that moon in Pisces, you're right. Piscean energy, it's really talking to source and going, okay, what do you want me to know here? I'm listening. Speak.
I'm listening.
Well, and I'm one for saying you got to ask and ask and ask and ask and ask and ask until the answers come. You know,
okay.
and sometimes with Piscean energy, sometimes you say, okay, source, reveal it in my dreams, please. Because sixth house can get mental, and you can get that 6 Scorpio energy kind of just mentally stirring and analyzing and pondering, you know, and Mercury ruler Sag 7th, you know, asking this person, that person, this person, that person. Transiting Chiron over that Piscean moon, maybe ask source, just show me in my dreams, show me in my dreams, show me in my dreams. And then ask until it's revealed. Which, by the way, Jeffrey Green's self-hypnosis, his unconsciousness self-hypnosis tape, I'll show you that at the end. That's another way to ask for it to be revealed, to just show you.
That's good. Okay.
The deeper levels with that. Yeah, I'd say that on some deeper levels, in addition to the emotional shock, there can be the, you know, the emotional trauma of trust.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's been something I feel like I'm learning. Is a little bit of trust.
Yeah.
But that was something that, you know, why I did so much myself, because I didn't trust anybody else to.
Right. That's Chiron in Scorpio. You know, the rug's going to get ripped out underneath me. I can't trust another human being in an intimate partnership.
Rely, especially not men.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's something you can do during Chiron's transit through Aries 12th. You don't have to go out there and actually try to do it in a relationship, although you are in one. Maybe you could, you know, do some visualizations of healthy intimacy in relationship in which trust can be there.
Well, that would be the super challenge.
Yep, my dear.
Okay. I guess if I'm ever going to be ready, I better do it now.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me check in. Is there any questions or anything, Leroy, from the board? Questions, comments?
Well, we have an observation from one of the other students on the calls. Do you want me to unmic her?
Sure.
Her, excuse me.
Oh,
Shannon, you're
hello. We can hear you. We can hear you. Hello.
Sorry, I just had to throw my earbuds in real fast. Just sending the volunteers so much love for that happened. But what I was wondering, because of the square to her natal Saturn and then the trust with men and the father, but I was, because of the South Node over connecting to Chiron and the 6th house of that wellness and that deeper emotional energy, it seemed like it's from another lifetime, stuck in the emotional layer maybe of the aura, that just when when everything lines up just right, like all like it's like a synchronistic event that could have caused that accident over, like it keeps repeating itself, like a skip in a record. So there's like like one of the, as the light comes through the whole body, it gets refracted because that one layer is like cracked, or it's like just wounded or something.
Okay, so wounding on the emotional astral level. And the accident is trying to jar that broken record and create some type of an awakening in order to heal on emotional levels. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. Beautifully wrapped up there.
No worries, I'm just listening. So
That was perfect.
okay, volunteer feedback. Did we lose our volunteer?
Well, no, I'm here. I keep thinking that is exactly what's happening. I just haven't gotten clarification on the details. For a number of years, I've been, you know, experiencing extremely emotional stuff, which I imagine is past life, around the suffering of indigenous people in this country.
Oh.
And that's all related, I think, to the fourth house stuff too. And I don't know if that's part of it or not.
Well, you know, one of the signs that relates to indigenous peoples is Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, you know, everybody relates it to Sag quite well, but Native Americanism specifically has a lot to do with Scorpio energy. And so, yes, you could be tapping in on that. You could be tapping in on your own woundedness from those types of lifetimes as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I
would say,
I can believe that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just very deep feelings around it.
Yeah. And I would say that you really, with Chiron's transit over Moon in Pisces, which again is still going to be similar to Chiron transiting the 12th house, okay? Boy, you've really got some opportunities to be healing on that emotional level. And remember, I said Chiron, the moon was just moving out of 10 degrees. It's just shy of 10 degrees past a trine. So it's almost to 130 instead of the 120. So call on that energy of that emotional trine to Chiron and keep asking source, what would you have me know?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you. Yes, and thank you to the person who spoke up. Anybody else, Leroy?
No, we're clear.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank both of our volunteers tonight, and thanking everyone. I'm going to quickly go through the last of my slides. Here's my 2 Chiron Centaur slides, the male and the female, so that we can have an equality in regards to our Centaur healing energy. My invocation, Spirit of God, Goddess, come through me. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through me. Heart of God, Goddess, love through me. Body of God, Goddess, I am. You can invoke that anytime you are wanting healing in any chironic way. And of course, we have finally made it through all 8 webinars in our Chiron series. And this is going to be followed by our Uranus in Taurus series. Before that, I'll do a free Mercury retrograde in Aries, which will be next Monday, March 19th. And then I put in the slide of all the years that Chiron has oppositions to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which covers all the way from 1952 to 2006. And then, of course, here's Jeffrey Green's unconsciousness reprogramming exercise. This is where you make your own recording of a self-hypnosis tape. You make it first person, you make it present tense, you create positive affirmations for every spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical wounding that you can remember. And you make this tape, and what you are basically doing is you listen to it every night when you go to sleep. And at first you can hear it, but you play it softly enough that it's your own voice whispering in your ear. You do the right ear only, right to receive. And Jeffrey would always say you must do it each and every night for 4 to 6 months. If you miss a night, you must start over. I've known people who've made one of these tapes and have listened to it for 2 years. The intent is you are reprogramming and healing the unconsciousness, which we can do our affirmations and heal consciously, but we've got to have tools to heal unconsciously. And not all of us have our own practitioner to do regression work with at the blink of an eye. So this unconsciousness reprogramming exercise is a way that you can do it with yourself. And the intent is to play this at night in your sleep. And you do it until your life changes. You do it until you see the old patterns break apart and you see your new world actually start to manifest. So you've got the 2 slides here that give you some little details on how to do that if you are interested in it. And so with this slide, we have come to the end of the entire Chiron in Aries series. Leroy will, you'll get an email from the webinar service. Be looking for that. You'll get an email from the webinar service that will give you a link to each and every one of these 6 classes so that you can have them for your own reference over the next 7-8 years as Chiron moves through Aries. And so I would just like to close by saying thank you to everyone who participated live. Thank you to everyone who listens to these webinars now and in the future as Chiron moves through Aries. And I just energize each and every one of us being spiritual warriors through Chiron and Aries, helping planet Earth, Miss Gaia, heal, helping all of us and all species heal however necessary. Thank you, everyone, and good night.